Okay, let me just share it onto my page, Bhagavad Gita 1.4. Share. Okay, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 1, text 4. Atra Shura Maheshvasa Bhimarjuna Samayudhi Yuyudhano Viratascha Drupadascha Maharataha. Atra, here, Shuraha, heroes, Maha Ishuasaha, mighty bowmen, Bhimarjuna, to Bhima and Arjuna, Samaha, equal, Yudhi, in the fight, Yuyudhanaha, Yuyudhana, Virataha, Virata, Cha, also, Drupadaha, Drupada, Cha, also, Maharataha, great fighter. Translation. Here in this army are many heroic bowmen equal in fighting to Bhima and Arjuna. Great fighters like Yuyudhan, Virata, and Drupada. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Even though Drishtadyumna was not a very important detail, let me say that again, even though Drishtadyumna was not a very important obstacle in the face of Dronacharya's very great power in the military art, there were many others who were causes of fear. They are mentioned by Duryodhana as great stumbling blocks on the path of victory, because each and every one of them was as formidable as Bhima and Arjuna. He knew the strength of Bhima and Arjuna, and thus he compared the others with them. Atra Shura Maheshvasa Bhimarjuna Samayudhi Yuyudhano Viratascha Drupadascha Maharataha. Translation again. Here in this army are many heroic bowmen equal in fighting to Bhima and Arjuna, great fighters like Yuyudhan, Virata, and Drupada. Om Jnana Timidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha.
Right, what do you get from this purport, Peru?
It's easy to skip over the first chapter of the Gita or to lose kind of interest at this point. There are a lot of unfamiliar names. People reading the Gita for the first time struggle here. Like, who are these people? You know, the Bhagavad Gita appears as one interlude conversation at a crucial moment in the Mahabharata, which is basically the Game of Thrones of the last 5,000 years in India. And this is the season finale of season 6. I think there's 6 seasons in Game of Thrones, right? It's a great final battle at the end of Game of Thrones in the final season. It's kind of the climactic battle, the resolution of the entire narrative, you know, with all its interweaving plot lines. And Bhagavad Gita is situated in the same location in the great epic, the Mahabharata. And so by the time that readers of that epic arrive at this point, they're deeply invested in the storyline, deeply invested in the characters. What's going to happen? That's our Dhritarashtra's question to Sanjaya, at the beginning. Kima kurvata Sanjaya? What happened? Everybody wants to know. They're on the edge of their seat. And it's at this crucial moment when viewer attention is focused at its maximum. It's the highest rated episode, it's got the most number of viewers. Everybody's on the edge of their seat to see what will happen. And then Vyasadeva inserts this interlude. Krishna inserts this interlude. at this point, everyone's watching. This conversation takes place. The most important part of the whole thing.
Right.
So readers in that world understand who Yuyudhan, Virata, and Drupada are. Readers coming to this for the first time, Western readers with no background in it, are just like, okay, who are all these people? We can take one person, perhaps, Drupad. Here in the purport, Prabhupada mentions Drishtadyumna and Dronacharya. Dronacharya is the teacher, the martial guru of the Pandavas and the other Kuru princes, Duryodhan. Drishtadyumna is the son of Drupad, and he's the military strategist of the Pandavas, responsible for arranging their military formation. He's a disciple of Dronacharya, and he also has been born with the benediction that he will kill Dronacharya, and he is the son of Drupad. Arjuna, one of the 5 Pandava brothers, is married to Drishtadyumna's twin sister, Draupadi. She's the daughter of King Drupad, obviously. So the manner in which Drishtadyumna is born with this benediction of being the one to kill Dronacharya is interesting and instructive. So Dronacharya and Drupada grew up together. Drona is the son of a scholarly teacher family, Brahmanas. And Drupad comes from a royal family of rulers. But they grew up together, studying together in the home of a Grihasta guru. So it is the custom in the Aryan civilization that the children of the upper classes, which means the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, and the Vaishyas, they, in their youth, spend time in the Gurukula, the family of the guru. So they go to live with a Brahmin teacher and his wife and their children, and they grow up as part of that family, as well as part of their own family of birth. And so in the Vedas, it is said that we have 7 mothers. One of those mothers is the Veda herself. Another mother is the cow from whom we get milk. The wife of the king is another mother, one's own mother, of course, from whom we are born, and another mother, some of the others, any other wife of the father who is not one's own biological mother, and the wife of the guru is one of the mothers, the 7 mothers. So Drupad and Drona, they go and live with a guru whose name I do not know, but they grow up in that family as part of that family. The Gurukula, the family of the guru. And as they grew up there together as children, they made a pact. Drupad said to Drona that we will share everything equally. When I become king, I will give you half of my kingdom. So many years later, after having left the Gurukula, King Drupad came into his reign as the king. And Drona had fallen upon hard times. And he thought to himself, why am I suffering so much here? I should go and see my good friend Drupad, and he will give me, as he promised, half of his kingdom. So he went to see Drupad, and he came to the palace where King Drupad was residing, and said to him, my dear friend Drupad, as you will recall, when we were children in the home of the guru, in the Gurukula, we made a pact that we would share half of everything. And you said to me that when you became king, you would give me half of your kingdom. And so I've fallen upon hard times, and it would really make a difference for me right now. And so I'm here now to collect on that. And Drupad laughed at him and said, such a thing can only be between equals. But you are a Brahmana and I'm a Kshatriya. And so you should understand that this is simply the speaking of a child that did not intend. It's unrealistic, man. It's like, come on, Drona, you grow up. It's like, those are just, you know, we were kids messing around. I mean, this is real, man. I'm like running a kingdom here. I can't just like divide this thing down the middle and give half of it to you. You crazy? Come on, dude. Like, I can help you out with a few bucks or something, but you know, maybe we can give you a meal. But as far as half of the kingdom goes, man, that's ridiculous. I mean, when you think about it, it does seem kind of ridiculous, you know, that Dronacharya would think that such a thing would actually happen.
Right.
You know, they're just kids messing around. He says something like that. And then Drone is going to roll up and actually like call on it. You see, there's two ways you can take it, right? You could be about that, like, I have said the thing, therefore it will happen.
Right.
Or you could just be like, dude, come on, you know? Like, spoken in jest and as a child, etc. See, these are
Yeah.
two different ways of approaching your speaking.
Mm.
And it might seem ridiculous, unrealistic for
Mm.
people today. You know, they'll say something and then they give themselves complete permission to revisit that thing.
Right.
They'll get married and then they'll get unmarried and then they'll
Mm.
get married to someone else.
Right.
And then they'll be like, well, you know, I didn't really mean it last time, but I do mean it this time. But if you give yourself permission to unmean something, or you give yourself permission to say something and then to make up a story called I didn't really mean it, or I know I said that I would do the thing, but at the time I was thinking that I didn't really want to do it. It's like, you know, your own
Right.
interpretation of your psychological experiences when you say something is unreliable.
And yet there's that, like you say, tendency to kind of like expect the other person to get it. Like, you know, like that was then. And the other person's supposed to be like, yeah, true, that was a long time ago. So therefore, you know, and that means so much. Oh, because time has elapsed, therefore you're allowed to change your mind.
Change your mind, yeah, as if you can actually do such a thing. Your mind changes you if you let it.
Mm.
Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that the mind is the best of all friends and the worst of all enemies. And then he qualifies that further by saying the uncontrolled mind is the worst of enemies, whereas the controlled mind is the best of all friends. How do you control the mind? You control the mind through your speaking. You know, you say something and it doesn't matter what you think or feel about it. What's real and what you relate to as real is what you say. This is another way of relating to your speaking. And this is the way that Drona related to his speaking and the speaking of Drupad.
Right.
And so he was like, you said it. Therefore, it is a thing.
Right.
Otherwise, how can I take anything you say as reality? I can't.
Mm.
You give yourself permission to speak something and then to later say that it doesn't mean anything. Well, what does mean something? Oh, I didn't really mean that. What I really meant was, you know, I said X, but what I really meant was Y. But as I'm listening to you, you just said that your speaking is unreliable. So Y is now no longer reliable because in the future you can say, I know I said Y, but I really meant Z. In other words, your speaking has become meaningless.
Mm.
It has no power to it. It has no
Mm.
reliability, no reality.
I think that's why there's also this way of speaking that is popular, which is uh, people say things that can be interpreted in different ways. Like it doesn't get them on the hook for anything. Like, yeah, I'll try. Like I'll be there. I'll try to be there at 10 a.m.
Okay, well,
It's like,
that's not an example of what you just created. So you said that people speak in ways that can be interpreted in different ways to get them off the hook. But there's no question of interpretation about that. What you've given as your example is I'll try to be there at 10 a.m. That's very clear. You will try to be there at 10 a.m. You have not made a commitment to be there at 10 a.m. You've made a
right,
commitment to try to be there at 10 a.m. And, you know, what does trying actually mean? You know, like, oh, I tried, but I couldn't make it. Like, there's no level, there's no it is very uncommitted speaking. I don't need to do really anything to fulfill my word in that case. I tried, so
Right.
therefore I have done what I said I would do. Were you there at 10? No, I didn't even get out of the house, but I started walking
Right.
towards the door
Yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
I
I
got
tried.
distracted by my mind. I tried.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a way of speaking that is uncommitted. It's like creating SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and bounded by time, which means that you can say, was the goal achieved? Yes or no. In the case of saying, I will try to do something, was the goal achieved? Literally, you need to do nothing and produce nothing, and you can still say the goal was achieved. So it is a worthless statement about the future. Speaking about the future has its real power when it is committed and it has the power to create a future that wasn't going to exist anyway.
So
So
like
that's,
marriage vows or
yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And, people degrade the power of their speaking to the point where when they give a marriage vow, it's given on top of such a lack of integrity that it has no power to it.
Hmm.
Whereas if you create your speaking, in the micro habits of speaking, micro commitments day after day, when you give your word to something like, we will be married until we die, and then, even beyond that, that has some power to it. Yeah, it
Hmm.
has some shakti, some
Hmm.
reality to it.
Right. Yes. I've heard that the Brahmanas, the teachers in Vedic society, their blessings would never go in vain, or their curses. So they could bless or curse someone that you will, like I think it was Narad Muni said to these two drunken brothers, I curse you to take birth as trees. And then they did, because his speaking is always married up with reality, because
Mhm.
he always fulfills on his word. So his word and his speaking have become one, such that now he can speak something and it creates a reality, even for
Yeah.
someone else.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah, in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, Lord Brahma says, because I have seized onto the lotus feet of Sri Hari with such zeal, nothing I have said has ever proved to be false, nor
hmm.
has my mind ever been degraded by attachment to temporary matter. Um, People think of their speaking as being like descriptive, and they lose sight of the fact that it's actually prescriptive. I think it was Henry Ford who said, both the man who says he can and the man who says he can't are correct. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Hmm.
So the manner of speaking of these personalities is such that they give their word to something, and then they completely ignore the mind, the thoughts, circumstances, everything, and fulfill on what they said they would fulfill on. And that's the speaking that Dronacharya, that's the relationship that Dronacharya has to his word. So when Drupad goes back on what he said he would do, this becomes a really big problem for Drona. And it's personal and it's not personal at the same time.
Right.
Like, what kind of a king does that?
Right.
How can this king actually be a worthy ruler of the people? How can they count on this guy if he just gives himself permission to just change his mind? Um, and so what Drona does is he secures the role of the martial teacher in the house of Kuru and becomes the military teacher of um, the Pandavas and the Kuru princes, of all the Kuru princes, including the Pandavas. And then at the end of their training, there is a custom called Guru Dakshin, which is where one gives some offering to the teacher. So for his Guru Dakshin, Drona asks the princes, I want you to go and conquer Drupad, capture him, and bring him to me bound. So he's now managed to raise for himself a private army of extremely qualified fighters And there's 100, the brothers, Duryodhana's 100 brothers, and then there's the 5 Pandavas. So first, Duryodhana and his 100 brothers go. They fight their way to the castle inside the palace, but they're unable to capture Drupad, who defeats them, drives them back. So then the Pandavas go. They fight their way into the palace, and then Arjuna engages Drupad in single combat and manages to subdue him and bring him to Drona bound hand and foot. So in this way, Drupad is humbled before Drona, and Drona takes something from him, as tribute, part of his kingdom, something. As a result of this, Drupad desires to get revenge on Drona, and so he commissions the Brahmanas to perform a great sacrifice to give him a child who will be able to kill Drona. And then the other thing that he wants is, because he's so impressed with Arjuna's prowess in combat, that Arjuna was able to subdue him in single combat, that he also asks for a wife to give to Arjuna, because he wants Arjuna as his son-in-law. And so from that sacrifice are born the twins Drishtadyumna and Draupadi, the daughter of Drupad. Draupadi becomes the wife of Arjuna, and Drishtadyumna becomes the military strategist of the Pandavas in the Kurukshetra war. And Drupad, with his army, joins the side of the Pandavas. So that's the background of how Drupad comes to be on the side of the Pandavas, how Drishtadyumna, who has the benediction to kill Dronacharya, becomes the military strategist of the Pandavas. And also, although not mentioned here, how Draupadi becomes the wife of Arjuna. So you can see just in this one example of taking this one name from this one verse of how interconnected these two sides are and how much history there is between them. Drona is the teacher of Arjuna. He trained Arjuna, and on his command, Arjuna attacked with his brothers, attacked the kingdom of Drupad, and Arjuna subdued Drupad personally in one-to-one combat. As a result of that, Drupad gets a daughter who becomes Arjuna's wife, because Drupad's thinking to the future, I'm going to get my revenge on this guy, and I need to make sure that this guy Arjuna's on my side because he just beat me. And if he's on Dronacharya's side, it's going to be a problem. So I'll have a daughter who will marry this guy, then he'll be my son-in-law. Definitely his wife, my daughter, is going to be in his ear saying, you got to fight with on Drupad's side, So Drupad secures Arjuna and also binds himself to Arjuna. And then he gets a son who will kill Drona. Now Arjuna has, look at the situation Arjuna is in. His teacher and his father-in-law are enemies with this long-standing, and they're also best childhood friends, this long-standing feud between them. And Drupad's so long thinking that he has these two children to fulfill on this, to secure Arjuna and to kill Dronacharya. So you can actually choose any one of the characters on the battlefield and turn them into the main character, and then reanalyze the situation in terms of their narrative, and you'll encounter the same overlapping, conflicting loyalties.
Right.
But Arjuna is the main character in this conversation that takes place. But we're looking at it right now from the perspective of Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, who have opened this conversation.
Right. Yeah, got it. So yeah, today's theme is kind of like, yes, integrity, and like someone's holding another person to account for what they said, even though they were a kid. And yeah, you could say, well, it's ridiculous, he was a kid, but it's like, well, word is word. The two different ways of approaching one's speaking.
Yeah, you get married at whatever age you get married at. And if it's before 25 and you're male, your brain's not even fully formed.
Right.
There's no way that you can know what life will be like in 20 years' time. You've never lived like that. You've never lived life. Let's say you get married at 24. You've never lived life as a 44-year-old. So you have no idea of what that will be like. What's going to carry you through that? Are you hoping for peak psychological performance, experience and like rainbows and unicorns all the way through, all the time? And then you're going to get there and you're going to go, oh, I married the wrong person. If you give yourself permission to think that way, of course, what is it? So you're rolling the dice, basically. Did I marry the right person? There's absolutely no way for you to know if you think like that.
Right.
That's descriptive thinking. That's thinking of your speaking as descriptive.
Yes.
Rather than prescriptive.
Yeah.
Who is the
Rather than
right person?
creating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got talking to a friend of mine, and he was saying, he's in a relationship, and he said, I'm just, just taking it slow, trying to make sure she's the right, see if she's the right one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an approach. That's an approach to, finding your life partner. But I think there's holes in that as well, because it's like, if you are approaching it like that, then it's like you're trying to describe a reality that only exists really in your head. Like, is this person the right one? That's for you to say. So if you just say that.
Well, it's a good question, because the question then becomes, well, how would you know?
Right.
And if you ask people that, you'll find out that they have no idea what they're doing. How would you know? I don't really, it's not, it's not scientific. Like, okay, there's these things, because if it was, how long does it take you to figure that out? Like, what are you trying to do? What they're trying to do is they're trying to do two things at the same time. They're trying to figure out whether this person is the right one, and at the same time, they're trying to figure out what that means.
Right.
They don't actually know, because if you look at it, and the story of Cinderella is very instructive in this regard, that, that prince meets this woman, Cinderella, for one night in a dance, and then she goes away, but he's smitten, but he has the glass slipper that she's left behind. And he then just goes through the kingdom, testing each of the girls to see, does she fit the glass slipper? And it's just a split-second thing. Yes or no, yes or no,
Right.
yes or no. Girl puts her foot in the slipper. This is her. Done. Because he has with him a very, very clear and precise definition of who is the right one. And all he needs to do is measure each of the girls against that definition until he finds the one that matches. And then it's instantaneous. But what these people are doing is they don't have the glass slipper. And so they're trying to simultaneously develop the glass slipper and figure out whether this person matches the glass slipper at the same time. It's ridiculous.
Right. It's all very vague and abstract and undefined. They don't have a glass slipper. Like, they've got some measure that, but it's unclear even to them what they're measuring the person against.
Yeah. Traditionally in the Vedic culture, people would marry the partner that their family would select for them.
Right.
Because they're selecting from a much more informed position.
Right.
They're taking guidance from a number of different places, from their own experience, from other people in their family, from astrologers, doing like compatibility kind of charts, that sort of stuff. And then also, because they're involved in the entire process, that creates a whole lot of social kind of, like, if you like, pressure, or you could call it support,
right,
for the union. And then also, if you look at Arjuna, he's walking along the riverbank one day and he sees this girl there, and he says, "Fair maiden, what are you doing walking alone in the woods? Are you searching for a husband? Why are you walking in the woods unaccompanied?" Next minute, she's impregnated, and then she has a child who fights at Kurukshetra with Arjuna. Like, within seconds, they're married. Just immediately. There's no like long wasting time with this, that, and the other thing. So it's a very different.
he's not wondering, oh, is she the right one though? I feel like that also kind of speaks to a person's weakness of character. If I'm like looking, oh, are you the right one? That means I think I could be severely like troubled. I mean, I guess it's a fair consideration. Like, will this person like trouble me? But like Arjuna, he's just like, he's not thinking like that. He's not thinking about like, is she the right one for me? Are we going to get along? So that's also interesting. You said they married within seconds. So
Yeah.
what is the basis for decision making for Arjuna as opposed to like my friend, for example, who's taking it slow? What's the difference there?
Your friend thinks that he is getting to learning to know the other person, but mixed in with that is he's getting to know himself. He's unclear about who he is. So he has like a real journey of self-discovery going on there.
Right.
The decision making. So the thing about it is that if you have a weak relationship to your word, really what he's relying on is, can this other person make it work? Or can there be, because I rely on like, feeling like I want to do the thing because I'll say something, but then later say, well, I don't, I'm not feeling it, or I didn't actually want to. The problem with this is that at all times, human beings have multiple psychological states going on. You know how, you buy a Toyota and suddenly you see Toyotas everywhere, right? Now, you were seeing the Toyotas before, you just didn't notice them.
Yeah.
You have a superposition of sensory, and then your mind will select among them based on something. Your own emotional experience is the same. You have like a conflicting set of emotions. You're excited about something, you're like, hopeful and like, wow, this is going to be amazing, but you're also a bit scared about it. Am I going to be able to do it? What will happen if it goes wrong? All of those emotional states are simultaneously present, but you select among which one is the dominant narrative based on how things are going. So you get to a certain point and then suddenly the hopefulness and the excitement gets down regulated, and I don't know if I can do this, what if it goes wrong, becomes up regulated, and you say, I know I said I'd do it, but I really didn't want to at the time.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So
go ahead.
What's the reality to any of that? There isn't any reality to that. Yeah, you did feel that, but you also felt like you did want to do it as well, but you're just picking and choosing based on what you're feeling and thinking right now. So going to your psychological states as a measure of reality, of even of like what you think and feel about something, is unreliable. Completely unreliable. The only thing that can be objectively analyzed or seen is what you say. When you construct yourself that way, you have a shot at having this thing work. But otherwise, what you're doing is you're trying to figure out, over time with this person, how do I feel? How do they make me feel? And, is that gonna, am I gonna feel like I want to do this for the next 20 years? Spoiler alert, no, you're not. That's why most marriages these days fail. Because people go into it not, it has nothing to do with how you feel. In the long run, if it's just all about how you feel, it's most likely not going to pan out.
Yeah. My advice to this friend was like, what's your list? What are you looking for specifically? Like, because if you're looking to see, is this person the right one, then you must know what the right one is. So
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
what's the right one? What's your list? Like, I had 10 things on my list, and somehow or other that someone showed up who ticked every single box. And when I saw, when I was able to recognize that, it was like, she's the one, and like there's no turning back from now. Like she's That's the glass slipper. And that's also a glass slipper, right? Is my word. So she fits my, she ticks the boxes. And then there's, yeah, like in that analogy, like you fit the glass slipper, so now I'm gonna marry you. That's my side. You've done your bit, now I'm gonna do my bit.
Yeah, with clarity comes focus, comes power. When you have that, you just go for it and then you make it work. And because your word has power, because you treat it that way, you have a shot at it. It's interesting that we come to talking about getting married, and I think it's a very salient point, and where we came from was the relationship between Drupad and Dronacharya, and how that speaking of something at a young age without knowing what the full implications
Right.
and ramifications of it are,
Yes.
turned into this whole thing. And it's
Right.
like in the experience of human beings, you may not be a king, you may not go to a gurukula with a future military teacher who can send the Navy SEALs after you, but like for most human beings, they are going to experience relationships and commitment, and like attempting to create some solid relational basis for a future, creating an environment for children, creating economic long-term success by investing together, that kind of thing. And that's a big deal for people today. And there's like a very low rate of success in that area.
Right.
And a lot of it relates back to this one point here about how people relate to their word and how they relate to their psychological states. If
Right.
you relate to yourself as your psychological states, like this is me, you don't change your mind changes you.
Mm.
You don't get a lot of say in how you feel.
Mm.
It just happens. And like this is an exploration, examination of the human condition. And Krishna will counsel Arjuna about this, because on the battlefield,
Right.
as we'll find, Arjuna suddenly does not feel like fighting. What are you going to do about that?
Exactly.
And so, Krishna will counsel Arjuna in this area. And if you were looking for like, okay, where in my life can I apply this? In the area of relationships and marriage, this is just 100% applicable.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite verses is in the second chapter where Krishna says, Sukha dukhe same kripa, lava lava jaya jayo, tato yudaya yujyasva naivam papam avapsisi. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so you shall never incur sin.
Yes.
Which is runs completely counter to the popular way of approaching life, which is I'll see how I feel. I don't feel like it. I do feel like it. I'm going to do it. And just basically acting on feelings alone. Krishna's like, don't act on your feelings at all, like happiness, distress, even the outcome, not just your feelings, but don't even act just for an outcome.
Yeah. Well, it's
Do
interesting that you say that, because Krishna's not talking about your feelings there. He's talking about outcomes.
Right.
But one thing about it is that mood for human beings is an unconscious, instantaneous assessment of future prediction. If you think you're going to win, you're just like, yeah, woohoo, you're feeling good. If you think that you're going to lose, you feel down. So this happens at an unconscious, instantaneous, as much as your brain is able to calculate its probabilities of success in some endeavor. When it calculates that you're not going to win, it generates a mood or an emotional experience. This is exactly what happens to Arjuna in this chapter. The traditional name of this chapter is Arjuna Vishada Yoga, which means the yoga of Arjuna's despair or despondency. Srila Prabhupada in Bhagavad Gita, as it is, has called it observing the battlefield, or observing the armies on the battlefield. But the traditional name is Arjuna Vishada Yoga. So it's the yoga of Arjuna's despair, because Srila Prabhupada calls it observing the armies on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So Arjuna automatically and unconsciously assesses, and he steps through the reasoning behind that to demonstrate it to us, to make it explicit. And as we go through this, you're going to find yourself kind of like, I kind of like, it's pretty inescapable, dude. Like, this guy is in a situation where literally it's all losing. And
Right.
so no wonder he feels despondent. There's no pep talk available about, well, have you considered this? Actually, you could win like this, because Arjuna correctly deduces that he's in a catch-22 situation where it's all bad no matter how it turns out.
Right. Right.
And so his despair is inevitable.
Right. If he doesn't fight, then they'll lose. And if he does fight, he has to kill family members. So
Yeah,
for him, it's a loss.
there's no modification of Arjuna's psychological state through a different perspective on the situation available. So now what? Because that's how people think. They think, if only I could feel better about this, then it would be okay.
Right. And Krishna just doesn't.
Yeah. So they, what they think is like, I'll get another woman then, or another partner, and then I'll feel better about the situation, because the problem is the person, like, I can't see any way that this could possibly work well with this person, so I'll replace them with another one. That's their answer to it.
Right. Sort of like an external, like it's rather than looking for, rather than accepting what is and being empowered about what is, we try to change what is to something else.
I'll get rid of this one and get another one, and then whenever that happens, I'll just repeat the same process. And after some time of playing this kind of Russian roulette game, most people find, that they can't get like a stable. Sometimes people do find, like, just empirically, that they are married once and they get divorced, married again, and it works that time.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, subsequent marriages, they continue, it doesn't work out this first, second, third time. It's a matter of changing that approach to it. I mean, one of the ways that it was done traditionally is that you just can't get out. And so you are like Arjuna. There's no way for you to think that modifying your psychology by changing the circumstances is the answer. Because Arjuna's situation, in an abstract sense, is he's in a situation, a set of circumstances, a set of conditions in life. He has a psychological experience of despondency about the future and sees no hope in it. And Krishna doesn't even say, oh, it's going to turn out all good. No, he doesn't do that.
Right.
It's such a counterintuitive way of thinking to the way that people think today.
Right. Yeah, he basically says, like, the consequences are none of your business. Like, the outcome, whether you win or lose, literally stop considering that. Like, stop being your feelings and stop being your considerations.
Yeah. He doesn't say to stop considering that, because you can't turn that off. It's an automatic, instantaneous, unconscious assessment. So that's what generates moods. You can't stop feeling what you feel, but you can stop letting that drive who you are.
And what you do. Right?
Yeah. And this is the point. People's like, I changed my mind. No, you didn't. You let your mind change you. That's a central shift in the Bhagavad Gita. And that's why Krishna says the uncontrolled mind is the worst enemy, because your mind will change you, just like the weather, man. The weather changes all the time. You have no control over that. And you don't have any control over how your mind, the flickering of the mind. And Arjuna even says it to Krishna. He says, Krishna, it seems to me like I would have better luck at trying to control the wind than trying to control my mind. The weather, the blowing of the clouds in the sky, and it's raining, then it's sunny. And like, I'd have more luck controlling that than I would controlling my mind.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a central shift that takes place in the location of who you are. Are you the mind? Are you your psychology? Are you your feelings? Or are you who you say you are?
Right. So Krishna, basically, his coaching for Arjuna is like a complete paradigm shift about who he is. Like, he literally takes his identity and points him towards another possible view of who he is.
Yeah.
rather than being like, well, if you just, do this, then maybe you can win. Or like, he doesn't entertain any of his own ideas. He doesn't give him any other ideas that kind of like run on this from the same
Context. Yeah, you are the set of circumstances and your psychological response to them. The combination of those things constitute who you are. And basically, once you accept that, you have very little say in what happens in life. You don't control the circumstances out there. You don't control your reaction to them. And so now what? You just like a black box where you get inputs and then outputs come out, and then you just act on those. You could be replaced by an AI or a robot that models the internal linguistic state. You're a machine,
right.
a mechanism. But Bhagavad Gita gives you a shot at transcending that and attaining real freedom in this lifetime.
I love that.
Actual liberation.
Bhagavad Gita gives us a real shot at transcending
the machine.
Yeah, the machine of our mind that's pretty much a concern for us, it's just, it's a set of feelings and considerations about our circumstances.
Yeah, it's the machine is the machinery of material nature. Like, one of the things here is when you're in that illusion, you think of yourself as separate from the circumstances. But like I just said, I could take what you call you out and replace it with an artificial intelligence, a purely mechanistic representation of decision making, feed it the same inputs and get the same output, which goes to show that it's purely mechanistic. And you really aren't there. What's the meaning of you? You're just like watching it happen and thinking that you're doing it.
Right.
And this is what Krishna will explain to Arjuna in here, is that that's actually what's going on. You only think you're doing this stuff. Yeah. That's why artificial intelligence is so scary for people, because it literally does show that you can be replaced by a machine with no change in anything. They build these digital twins of people that do exactly what the person does, and they can predict what you're going to do, clicking on things online, down to like extremely high degrees of fidelity. You think you're doing stuff, but you're just like watching it get done by machinery.
Interesting that we've, as a species, we've succumbed just by forgetting transcendental knowledge and transcendental technology. Human beings have become so mechanistic, and that's kind of paved the way for an AI takeover. Like it's for that.
That's not what Bhagavad Gita says. See, human beings have not become mechanistic. They are mechanistic.
Right.
They're part of the machinery of material nature. That's just the default reality.
But there was a time when people didn't act simply based on the mechanics of their mind.
There may have been times where more people acted not as the machinery. Everybody always has the opportunity to transcend the machinery, and how many people are taking advantage of it at different points in history is variable. And whether or not you or I or anyone listening to this individually takes advantage of that now is, another question again. But I don't so much buy into the kind of like, that even that way of speaking is kind of like it's an abrogation of individual responsibility to historical forces.
Right. Like I've become this way because we've all blah, blah, blah. Like,
yeah. Who cares? What do I even care? It's like, what are you going to do with your life?
Right.
Otherwise, you're just complaining about how the world sucks now and it used to be amazing, but now it's not. It's like,
right. And and inherent in that kind of speaking as like a victimhood, that I'm a part of this world that's going downhill. And
yeah, that's why I have that instinctive reaction to that kind of framing of the thing, because it does. Yeah, I think it's more powerful to be like, I'm here, the Bhagavad Gita is here. Let me take advantage of Bhagavad Gita, derive from it what I can, and then share that with others. And then you
Mm.
simply repeat that over and over again, and you create the golden age. And that's, creates the kinds of the civilizations that you're pointing to, where that becomes the dominant dynamic.
Yeah, make transcendence normal.
Exactly. Yeah. How long we've been going for now? How about we
Yeah, let's finish up here. Thank you for your
what's the
I don't see any time or anything around here, but
okay. All good.
yeah. Do you want to drop a shout out to or a plug for Kirtan Camp?
Yeah, so next weekend we have Kirtan Camp in Nurturing Soul in Dannevirke, North Island, New Zealand, aka Aotearoa. It's the new name that's getting put out there for this place. The Krishna Conscious Kingdom of Aotearoa. And it's over Easter weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you made it this far through this class and you live in New Zealand, like, what are you even doing? Not being there this weekend coming up. So go to www.kirtan.camp. It's just going to be all kirtan all the time for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, finishing on Monday morning.
Awesome. And I'm driving down. My wife and I are driving down from Northland down
Great.
to down to
Dannevirke.
Hawke's Bay. So yeah, Dannevirke. So got spare seats if anyone wants. Thanks so much for your time.
Which way are you going? You go through Auckland, Hamilton,
Yeah,
Taupo.
just straight down.
Okay. Do you go through Palmerston North, or are you going to go through Napier?
It could either, whatever.
Depending on where people want to come from.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Get out there. Got like 5 extra seats. All right. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay.
It's been great discussing Krishna consciousness with you, and look forward to next Sunday. We're going to do this every Sunday. Haribo.
Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. Total world victory of Hare Krishna.
Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Jai.